We're going to talk about elusive back tension, the thing that all archers are searching for. There's basically three ways to shoot. And the first way, which many people use, is called collapsing, creeping. To me, it's a recipe for just a terrible shot. With a recurve, if I'm creeping or collapsing my shot, it's almost physically impossible to get a good release with my hand. I don't know what the mechanics is, but it's like a metal hook. I just can't get a good release. For other bows, it could be the same thing, but for a recurve, that's especially true for me. There's also the still or static shot. It's basically a passive shot where there's no movement whatsoever, and there's people that shoot very well using that form, but it's not easy. It's more work. And what we're going to talk about is creating that great or really, really good shot and making it as easy as possible. An active or dynamic shot, what I like to call a good shot, is when you're moving through the bow. It's called that back tension, where you're actually pushing and pulling at the same time. Compound, recurve, Olympic recurve, it doesn't matter what you're shooting, it's a push-pull. And if you do it with your arms, you're engaging the wrong muscles. You want to try to engage your back. And so basically you're using your back tension to finish that push-pull. That allows your arms to be relaxed. So the idea is that last effort where you're actually using that dynamic shot, that active shot where you're pushing and pulling, it's basically all done with your back, allowing you to relax your bow arm and your release arm as much as possible. And you're going to get the best shot you can get, but it will be easier to achieve. It's really difficult to hold steady on a target if you're not expanding. So we're going to show you that today, break it down so you can get a better understanding of it, and we'll give you some tools to go out and practice that. And yes, I do shoot a compound, and one of the tools I use to shoot better with my compound is a recurve, especially in the winter season when we're shooting indoors. My scores aren't far off of my compound scores, so I like to use a recurve. And the reason I use a recurve is on an Olympic recurve, we can use what's called a clicker. It's a little piece of metal, and I'll show that up close. It basically ensures that you're pulling through the shot, that you've got that push-pull. Now, hopefully I'm engaging my back muscles, but when I shoot, I know my arrow is actually coming back and I'm actually pushing and pulling at the same time, getting that dynamic or better shot. And it makes it physically easier to hold on target. I'll show you how that works. This is Angela Chin. She's one of the young archers that comes into archery only. She actually started archery through our 101 course a few years back and got hooked, just like the rest of us, having a ball with archery. She actually participates on a team, and you can see how much more efficient and capable she is with a clicker than myself. Her transfer is very smooth. She pulls right through, there's no bobbing with the arrow, and she gets a nice clean release. And that's what that clicker does. It makes you continue to pull back. And you notice the clicker she has, it's similar to mine. It's mounted on the bow. And this is another young archer we have, Wesley Jones. And Wesley just loves archery. He's in the shop all the time. And he uses a different clicker. His is mounted on the brace of the sight, and that allows him to shoot a longer arrow, which will help him as he grows into his bow. And both clickers work the same. As the arrow is pulled back, they let the archer know that they've got that good expansion, and then they release the arrow. And you can see Wesley, he has a lot of fun with archery. Let's talk about equipment. I have a friend, George, generous to a fault. One of the most generous people you ever ran into, really well connected in the archery community. And he knew I was shooting indoors this winter with a recurve, and he lent me this riser. We'll get a closer look at this before. Now, I did offer to buy it off him. He didn't want to sell it, so I knew there's some personal attachment to it. And like I said, he's pretty well connected, so I started thinking about this, and this looks like something that may have been shot by the national team, maybe even in the Olympics. And my style of shooting when I'm at a range, public range, outdoor range, or indoor, and people ask you about my equipment, the first thing as I do, I put it in their hands and go, give it a shot. I like to let people try different equipment. If I have it, they're more than welcome to shoot it. And I was afraid that this riser, even though they're almost indestructible, I didn't want somebody to drop it, scratch it up or something, so I decided not to shoot it. So I got a different setup here. Still got my Hoyt limbs, I just got a different riser here. And either one of these pieces of equipment is gonna shoot well for you, and you'll never need another riser as long as you live. Limbs, on the other hand, are interchangeable. You can put any limb you want on these risers, and it's called ILF, which stands for International Limb Fit. Actually came up by Hoyt in the 70s. Thank you, Hoyt. Basically, it meant any manufacturer anywhere in the world, Europe, Asia, Americas, it doesn't matter. Somebody designs a ILF riser or an ILF limb, they're completely interchangeable. I just grabbed the bow off the shelf here in the shop, and these are ILF, and that ILF that I was talking about that Hoyt actually developed. Again, thank you, it's international. I can buy any bows from China, America, Hoyt, whatever, and they just pop right out. You have a little indent spring here, simply put them in, click them in, and you can change limbs the rest of your life, going up in weight, different styles, different qualities. Now I do like nice equipment, so I did get my Hoyt limbs. These are a bamboo graphite limb. It's a very good limb. And even though Hoyt introduced this brought us into that ILF, that International Limb Fit, they also came up with their own bow that you have to have very specific limbs for that riser, the formula. You can only use formula limbs on a formula riser. So with that in mind, anytime you buy a setup, make sure that you know what you're getting. If you're getting ILF, you can put ILF, International Limb Fit, anywhere in the world on it. If you don't get ILF, you're gonna have to know that when you make that purchase. So you don't buy a used bow from someone and go, oh, this is great, thinking you got an ILF riser or limbs, and then you can't put anything on that bow. So make sure you know what you're getting. Archery shop will always help you do that. So with that in mind, we'll show you some of this equipment. Do I like nice equipment? Absolutely. I've been in this shooting game long enough to know a couple things. One, I'm not a great shot, so I'm not going to benefit by the best equipment in the world. Unfortunately, I've shot enough that I can tell when I have good equipment in my hands, and that's one of the reasons a lot of times I'll go with high-end equipment like these Hoyt limbs. You don't need to do that. To learn this game, to learn that back tension that we're talking about, in a recurve, because you can put a clicker on it, it's going to help you get that muscle memory where you're pushing and pulling. You don't need this high-end equipment, but if you're like me and you like good equipment, hey, it's a lot of fun. One of the things these bows can do with a sight and a good stabilizer system, I've got friends that are very good shots, freestyle and bow hunter, and I like field ranges, trails, long shots, etc. And there's always a certain distance, it's usually around 70 yards, that I just seem to lock in. And I have friends of mine that I can beat rather consistently, and it just ties them in knots. They can't understand why a recurve guy should be able to outshoot a compound guy. I shoot for myself, I actually reflect on my scores, but it's always fun to beat your buddy with a compound when you're using a recurve. Let's talk about the arrows I'm using. This is an Easton ACE. I can only dream about their X10s, but they're both barreled shafts. Some people call them parabolic. And most shafts for arrows in the industry are completely parallel. So I'll hold this diagram up. They're completely straight and parallel on each side, where a barreled shaft or parabolic is wider in the middle. Now please bear with me on my graphics because I'm not an artist, but I'm basically trying to show you it's much fatter in the middle and thinner on the ends. And what that does for a finger shooter, when you shoot the arrow, The rear end and the front end oscillate a little faster and a little more forgiving. So if you were to make a mistake with your fingers, and to get the same release every time with your hand is virtually impossible. We just try to mirror it to get as close as possible. If things are different, this arrow will kind of mask that. It's like makeup, it'll make it go away. Where if you have a straight shaft, it's going to be less forgiving, and it's going to magnify that and maybe push you out a ring or two on the target at 50, 60 yards, something like that. 40 yards, 30 meters, whatever it is. So a finger shooter, if you haven't shot these arrows, you're really missing the boat. You need to try barrel shaft, ACE X10 once in your life. You may never go back. Let's talk about equipment. This is my Olympic recurve bow, Hoyt Grand Prix limbs, 36 pounds, which are perfect for me for both indoors and outdoors. Wind and Wind riser, an CXT carbon fiber riser, which I just absolutely love. This is a great bow for me, but I shoot 3 bows year round. This is what I use to work on my back tension, to develop those muscles, which this video is going to go into detail in explaining. I also shoot a Black Widow recurve, which I'll give you close-ups of all this equipment as we go. And this bow is what I do most of all my bird hunting, small game, rabbits, javelina, stuff like that. And then when it comes to big game, out comes the big guns. This is my Hoyt Ventum 33, and this is a fantastic bow. And this is what I use my big game on, because I want to make sure that I do a good clean kill. In California, where I do most of my hunting, or a lot of my hunting, we don't get the luxury of shooting 15, 20 yards like many of you back east in tree stands. They're farther shots, and my distances in a recurve are right around 25 yards, maybe 30. With my hunting recurve, 54 pound, like I said, Black Widow bow. This will get me out a little farther and a much tighter group, which will guarantee success.
When it comes to back tension, you're really opening up a can of worms for most archers, because it's really a hard concept to get through to most intermediate or even advanced archers. I think most of us would have a better chance of catching a unicorn than to really learn to shoot back tension 100% properly. So I'm going to give you Wayne's perspective, and I'm going to kind of dumb it down because that's how I roll. So for me, the single most important takeaway from this is simply this, is to make sure that when you're shooting, you are not static. So as soon as you come back and you hit full draw, you want to make sure that you're pushing and pulling through the shot. Now, what muscles you're using is totally up to you. Theoretically, you're supposed to be using major muscle groups that run off your spine and back, and maybe even your shoulders a little bit. Everyone does it a little differently. So me personally, for some reason, all the years I've shot, I use a lot of my muscles in my shoulders to shoot my bow. I generally shoot a heavy hunting bow, and those major muscles really fire up and work well for me. But the main thing and the most important aspect to shooting good shots and consistent shots is to make sure that when you're back at full draw, that you're actually pushing and pulling through the shot. And when I mean that, I want to make sure that you're pushing, if you're right-handed, off your bow arm, straight towards your target, using your shoulder, not your wrist. And I want to make sure that when I'm back at full draw, that I'm pulling either my shoulder muscles or back muscles straight back. This does two things for you. The pushing and pulling steadies down your aim, and it slows down the aiming oscillation to make you aim a lot tighter. The other thing it does when I'm pulling and pushing through the shot is it allows me to get the same tension every time in the shot. So I don't care if I'm hunting, if I'm practicing in my backyard, or if I'm shooting in a tournament. When I go through my shot routine, one of the main components of that is simply telling myself when I'm at full draw and aiming to keep pulling through the shot. If I do that, the tension of every shot is real consistent. I don't shoot near as many left and right arrows, and I just execute a lot more consistently. So I think that's going to be your biggest takeaway from this back tension segment. You can't really have a conversation about shooting back tension without talking about back tension releases. When it comes to back tension releases, there's a ton of them out there. They're really broken down into two distinct different styles. The first is going to be like a hinge release. This is an Ultra View hinge release. It's really a basic back tension release. It's on a half moon shape and a fixed sear right here. And when you pull it back, You're simply going to use your back muscles and apply tension straight back, relax the back of your hand, and rotate. When you rotate your fingers, the sear slips off the half moon and the shot breaks. This is a really no-frills back tension release. These have been around for a long, long time in one shape, way, or form, and these things work great. The second style of release we're going to talk about is a tension release or a resistance release. So this right here is a stand prefix resistance. This works off of the holding weight of your compound bow. So if you're only holding 6 pounds back at full draw, when you apply tension to 7 pounds, which means you're using your back tension to pull straight back, and then your holding weight goes up 1 pound, this will break. These releases you can set to any holding weight depending on the weight of your bow and how much let off you have. This is a really cool release because it's got a safety on it, which is this trigger right here. And when you pull back, there's no way this will go off until you take your finger off the safety. So this is a great way to start your road on using a back tension release and keeping really safe, because we've all heard those stories of shooting a back tension release, how it can be dangerous, or you can whack yourself in the face if you don't use it properly when you draw the bow back. The other thing that's great about back tension releases is here in the shop, we use them a lot when our customers have target panic issues. Target panic issues generally stem from a fear of missing. Target panic is basically when you pull back your bow and you're freezing at 6 o'clock low on the target with your sight pin, or you can't aim on the spot and execute the shot. And this is something that archers tend to get after they've shot the bow 4 or 5 years, and it kind of sneaks up and it makes your passion, which is archery, really, really mentally defeating. Going to a back tension release or a resistance release, I've seen guys go from not being able to hold the spot at all, and in 30 seconds, they can execute a good shot. So this is a great, great cure-all or fix-all for anyone that has target panic issues. If you're a hunter, most people don't shoot back tension releases when you're hunting, but Stan makes a Longhorn Hex, which is this little guy here, which is on a wrist lanyard. And I actually have quite a few of my guys that have target panic issues using this back tension release. This is a great release for somebody that needs to hunt and that's really looking to combat that target panic issue and get back into proper shooting mode and really, really be able to aim tightly on the spot again. So back tension releases are great, especially for fixing target panic, as well as taking you to the next level when you're shooting target archery.
Another resource that you have out there is a gentleman by the name of Jake Kaminsky, 2-time silver medalist for the U.S. Way to go, Jake. Fantastic information on YouTube. He's got his own channel and he's got so much content, it can almost drive you crazy. And that's a word of caution. Great resource, but if you're a young archer or you're a new archer and you're getting into this, if you tried to basically assimilate or incorporate everything Jake's talking about, it's going to destroy you or you go crazy. Okay, so I'm sure Jake's the first one that would tell you you need to pace yourself with the information he's giving out. He's given out a lifetime of information and 10 years of world-class competition, including 2 Olympics, that he's disseminating on YouTube. So pace yourself with that. If you have a coach, especially if you're a young archer and you have a JOAD coach, and you're thinking to yourself, hey, why hasn't my coach told me this information? He's probably pacing you, because you just can't dump all this information on a young archer. So if you have a good coach, they're gonna say, this is what we're working on now. Once you master that, you go, here's the next element. So please take in consideration when you watch Jake, and like I said, he's just been a godsend for anybody into recurve archery. The information's incredible, but pace yourself. One of the main reasons that we're using this Olympic recurve is it has a clicker on it. And it is my physical tool, physically to listen when I'm doing that expansion. It teaches me, my body, to get those muscle memory of that push, pull, that expansion in the shot. And it's really easy to carry that over into my hunting season with my compound. And then one of the other reasons I shoot all these different bows that I showed you, and I even have a bow I didn't bring, one of my favorite bows of all time, my fishing bow, a Hoyt. It's a Hunter. It's the same bow that Chuck Adams made famous with his Super Grand Slam. that's my fishing bow, because a recurve's just a little too long to shoot out of a canoe for me, because I do all my fishing out of a canoe, my bow fishing, most of it. And a compound is perfect, plus it puts a little more speed on the arrow that I couldn't even achieve with my 54, 60-pound recurves that I have. The compound just zips it out, and that bow is amazing. I can hit a bottle cap at 10 yards, no sight, just shoot it out there with a big fishing arrow and a string on it. Can't get much better than that. So those are the 4 bows I primarily use: the Olympic Recurve, my Black Widow, my Hoyt Venom 33, and then my old Hoyt finger compound bow. It's a long bow for fingers, and like I said, it's amazing for bow fishing. And these things, by rotating the bows, it really keeps my interest up, keeps me really elevated into the sport. Also, I'm sure I have a tournament maybe once a month, once every 2 months that I'm going to go to that I really want to shoot well at. Maybe a big hunt at the end of the year. With all these things happening throughout the year, it's super easy for me to go out and dedicate that time if it's cold or rainy, or if I have to go to a shop or wherever I'm shooting, to make sure I get that practice in, because I've got something coming around the corner that I want to perform well in. So whatever it takes for you to keep your excitement, your energy level up, your focus, do that, figure out a plan, and then your archery skills will just develop along the way. Good luck.